My name is Megan Lutz, and I want to welcome everyone for coming to the Central Street Neighbors Association District 65 Candidate Forum for the upcoming election. If you're not familiar with Central Street Neighbors, we're a neighborhood organization that's centered around the north end of Evanston, and our purpose is to promote social welfare in the Central Street and wider Evanston area. We have a website where we post hyper-local information, but anyone is welcome to publish blog articles from all over Evanston on our website. We recently, just last weekend, had a shredding event where people could bring documents, boxes of documents to be shredded, and we'll probably be having another one because it was so well received and everybody always has stuff that needs to be shredded, and it seems like shredding events haven't been going on. So we encourage you to check out our website at centralstreetneighbors.com and consider joining, becoming a member, and being a part of our neighborhood group. With that, I would like to introduce Jeff Smith, who's going to be our moderator for this evening. He's our vice president of Central Street Neighbors, and many of you know from his activism in the community, his writing, or his legal work. However, you may not know that he's also an educator who has taught at the undergraduate and graduate level, as well as student teaching in a kindergarten, and has mentored hundreds of Evanston youth in scouting, AYSO, youth baseball, and softball and chess. Like all of us at Central Street Neighbors Association, he's passionate about the Evanston schools. So please welcome Jeff Smith.
Thank you so much, Megan, and thank you for your work with Central Street Neighbors. Evanston's non-for-profit community, of which we are a part, is a vital part of its vibrancy, and it's a credit to both the neighborhood and the wider community that we have groups like this willing to put on forums for people who want to come to forums like this. We've received probably an unprecedented amount of email and questions and interest from the community. I think the mayoral and aldermanic races have taken up a lot of bandwidth, and it can be hard for folks, quote, lower on the ballot, even though it's not a long ballot, to get any traction in press, etc. So thank you all for running. Thank you for coming here tonight, and you're really doing a service to the community. As we explained, but I think we had some late arrivals here, we're going to have a relatively short number of questions. I'll get to them ASAP. We're going to offer you all an opening statement, a closing statement of 1 minute each, and then answers to questions where you'll also have 1 minute. You don't have to use that minute. If the person who spoke before you, or two or three candidates before you, said something that you completely agree with, you're completely free in the interest of time to say, I agree with whatever so-and-so said. I couldn't have said it better myself. And both the moderator and the audience may give you brownie points for that. I've randomized the questions order of responses so that each of you will get a chance to be first, each of you will get a chance to be last. In between, you'll all be in the middle, and there was no particular scheme, rhyme, or reason to it. I just put together a spreadsheet, and it was like an 8x8 Sudoku. And then at the end, the last three questions will just sort of be a lightning round of for, against, undecided, and I suppose you can hit the evade button. But we've got 2.5 weeks to the election. The voters are trying to make up their minds between 8 people in a race that has not been on the front page of the Tribune or Sun-Times or CNN. So let's go with it. Opening statements, 1 minute. Are there any questions before I start? Okay, again, thank you all and good luck. First opening statement, I'm going to use last names if it's okay with you, is Ms. Blazing.
Hi, my name is Angela Blazing. I'm a 9-year resident of Evanston. I have 2 middle school daughters. I live in North Evanston, near Willard. And I have a pretty deep finance background. I have my BBA and MBA, and I've spent about 25 years working for various real estate owners, and I currently work for Hyatt Hotels. And I'm running for the board primarily because I think that we need to represent the community and have diverse discussions. And I think my finance background would be very valuable, especially given some of the budget issues that we're facing. I'm also very interested in education and getting kids back to school, and have been very big part of the Reopen Evanston schools, and want to help teachers and classrooms find ways to get back and to get kids back in school and caught up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Sue?
Thank you. My name is Donna Wang Su. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a spouse of a small business owner here in Evanston. I'm parent to kids at Walker and Shute. I was born in Evanston, but raised in the west suburbs by immigrant parents from Taiwan. And I'm definitely the assertive big sister of 4. My husband and I moved to Evanston 15 years ago, and I don't know if it's a fault or a strength, but I've always been involved in the community, whether it's through MWEB for City of Evanston, nonprofit with the Parent Circle or HIP Circle, or served on the international board for my sorority, Alpha Kappa Delta Phi. And then even with my kids, I've coached their sports teams, served on PTAs, taught religious education, and then also on PTA Council, where I'm currently president. Wanted to run for school board because I think that this is such a pivotal time of district leadership. And I think that the current school board has created some really great policies that I would love to be a part of. And I think that I bring some strengths, especially around the finance and change management that I would like to bring to the district. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Kim?
Thanks, everyone. My name is Sula Kim. I am a 14-year resident of Evanston in Southeast Evanston, here with my husband and 2 children, a 3rd grader and a 7th grader. And I'm running for a full term after being appointed to the board in the spring after a vacancy, because I think we are at a pivotal time with a visionary superintendent who is putting serious work and plans in place for equity initiatives. And I think I want to support the systems change approach to make our schools better for all of our children. And currently I am an assistant dean of graduate programs at Northwestern University in the School of Professional Studies. And I believe my skills in strategic planning and academic program development, budgeting, faculty development, and curriculum development would be an asset to the board. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And please correct me if I mispronounce this, Ms. Mubayaye, is that right? You're muted.
Yes, actually it's perfect, Muboyai. So my name is Ndona Muboyai, and I'm a 5th generation Evanstonian, but not born in Evanston. Born in Harlem, the village of Harlem in New York City. But I grew up here, and I left here to go off to college in New York City. I studied fine arts, French, and I'm currently working on a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology, but I can only do it 1 class at a time, so only God knows when I'll finish. But at the same time, I am very active in the community here in Evanston. I am the president of a local grassroots organization called Our Village Black Evanstonian that focuses on the well-being of the Black community. I'm also a member of the NAACP local Evanston chapter, and I'm very active on a number of committees with them. And I also work very closely with the immigrant and refugee population. Though my mother is African American, my dad was from Central Africa, from Democratic Republic of Congo. So I'm very active in that community, assisting with immigration services and advocacy. And the reason why I decided to run is because I feel that my voice needs to be heard in order to stand up for those that are most marginalized.
Thank you so much. Ms. Lindsay Ryan, and correct me if I'm not using the right pronouns. Or...
No, she, her, hers is fine. My name is Biz. I have lived in Evanston since 2003. I've been on the board since August of 2019. My professional life, I'm an equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant that works primarily with schools and school districts, although also museums and nonprofits and other organizations. I taught classes at DePaul for 15 years and worked at Northwestern at the Women's Center for 8 years. So I'm passionate about education. I have 3 kids in the district. I have 1 at Chute and 2 at Dawes. I also spent the day organizing softball teams because I'm one of the commissioners for the EBSA softball. So hopefully you got teams you want. I coach softball, I coach basketball. I've been a Girl Scout leader. I'm passionate about our youth and making sure our kids have an equitable experience in our district. It's why I co-founded the PTA Equity Project and why I'm grateful to have been able to serve on the board and hope to continue that work.
Thank you so much. Ms. Weatherspoon?
My name is Marquise Weatherspoon, and I am the single mother of 4 great boys, 2 of which are at Nichols, 1 at Chute, and 1 at ETHS. I am also the current PTA treasurer for Chute. I am the president of Advocates for Action, which is a leadership council here in Evanston for Cradle to Career. I also serve as a minister on the ministerial staff at Christ Temple Missionary Baptist Church. I am a 3rd generation Evanstonian, lived here all of my life. And my desire to run was rooted in the fact that I believe that I bring a different perspective and thought to the current board and would like to continue the equitable work that has already begun and also bring a diverse way of thinking. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Halpern?
Thank you and happy birthday, Megan. My name is Joey Halpern and I am running for re-election to the District 65 School Board. I want to do this again for another 4 years because the work is not done. I am the proud husband and father of 4. I have a daughter at Chute, 2 sons at Walker, and 1 that is coming up through the ranks. I am an educator by trade. I've lived in Evanston for 35 years. I am the son of a school secretary at Washington. I've taught at Kingsley Elementary, and I'm an elementary school principal for the past 15 years. And I have a keen awareness as to how to turn a cruise ship liner around as big as the Evanston Skokie School District 65. We have to do so with a few things which are priorities of mine. Sustainability for a long-term future that can be handled without upsizing and downsizing constantly financially, as well as with a positive climate and culture, because that's what our students deserve and our communities deserve for strong schooling. And those are the skills that I bring to the board, working with people and being able to enact change to do those things well and keep people on the table while we're moving towards reopening schools safely. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Voorhees?
Hi, I'm Katie Voorhees, and I've lived in Evanston for 24 years. I went to Northwestern for my undergraduate and graduate degrees. I have 3 children. I have a 2nd grader at Orrington. I have a kindergartner, and I have a 3-year-old, so they keep me on my toes. I've also been a mental health clinician in private practice for the past 17 years. And so for the past 17 years, I've been listening to the voices of children and families, particularly in marginalized groups, such as the LGBTQ community and Black and Brown community. And as I was thinking about running for the board, I was listening to all of my patients just talk about their distress, particularly with the remote learning situation in my practice. And I just became acutely aware of how unhappy people were and how much they're suffering. And at the same time, I grew increasingly frustrated with the district's reopening plan. It was very piecemeal and disorganized. And I have colleagues who volunteered to be on the medical advisory panel. And finally in January, they were taken up on that. And finally, schools have opened safely. And that is the point, to open safely. I'm also concerned about the structural deficit. And I'm concerned that there could possibly be 1 to 2 school closures if we're not managing our money responsibly. And so that's a huge concern, because what will that do to the communities that the schools have been closed in?
Thank you, Ms. Voorhees. We have over 170 people tuning in right now. So we're going to jump right into the questions. District 202 has been able to balance its budget out of this pandemic, but District 65 seems to be facing current or future deficits despite a hefty tax increase only recently. Is the district's fiscal house in order? And if not, who's at fault and what needs to be done? I realize it's a tough question for a minute, but Ms. Weatherspoon, I'll let you start off.
Well, thank you so much for that question. I think that the deficit is certainly a concern. I do believe that we or they have a good eye on the situation and have plans in place as far as how to get us from under this crisis. They have been hit a lot with obviously during this pandemic, just based on where majority of the funding comes in through. So I think that with the new structure that they plan to implement, and also any new ideas that they would get from the recent surveys, I think that it's going to be looking up. I don't know that it'll happen soon, but I think that they are committed to the work. And certainly if I am elected, I would be committed to the work as well.
Thank you. Ms. Kim, are we in good fiscal shape? If not, what needs to be done?
We are facing a structural deficit that has been in place for decades. I believe Joey shared recently the historical documents from when the referendum was being passed. And, you know, the referendum in 2017 was never meant to solve the structural deficit. It was meant to buy us time to evaluate and figure out where cuts needed to be made and where we needed to right size and figure out efficiencies. And that's where we are now. Unfortunately, that timeline has been shortened because of the pandemic, and you know, the revenues that have decreased because of how property taxes are levied and how much we can collect in terms of property taxes. So there are a lot of factors that contribute to the structural deficit, and the issue is that the solutions were not addressed earlier. And so the board, whatever board is elected, will need to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Blazing, do you agree or do you have a different take on it?
I think the budget is a direct reflection of fiscal mismanagement, both by the board and the superintendent. And I think that, and I'll just read from a spreadsheet I had. When the referendum was done in 2017, there was a pledge to use that money to fund certain funds over time, including capital improvements, contributing $1 million to the fund. The first 2 years after the referendum, those pledges were met, meaning that revenue exceeded expenses by more than the amount that was supposed to be saved into those funds. That reversed 2 years ago and has continued to decline. So much so that we didn't even save the $1 million that we pledged tax holders to save into the fund this year. If we continue on the trajectory that we're on, we will be in dire financial straits. $4 to $5 million budget cuts every year is going to wreak havoc on education. And I think it's a big problem, and I think it needs to be solved.
Thank you. Ms. Voorhees, what's your take?
I agree. And despite knowing that the structural deficit exists, the current board and administration, the board has approved for the administration to continue increases in spending by hiring many new positions, 10 new administrative positions that do not impact students in the classroom that equal $1.5 million. By the way, enrollment has gone down at this point by almost 500 kids. Kids are leaving the district. Principals are leaving the district, 3 in the past few weeks. Many people in the district have P cards with a $3,000 limit. I just see so much mismanagement, so much so that now a school might need to be closed. And what does that mean? That means that kids are going to have to be moved to a different school, larger classroom sizes, fewer teachers. I think this is unnecessary, and we need to stop spending the money that we don't have.
Thank you. Ms. Mobiaye, do you see mismanagement or structural deficit or both? And
I actually do see a bit of both, and I actually agree with both Katie, Angela, as well as Sula. I believe that there is some management, but I also do believe that whomever is going to be on the new board must address these issues immediately. And in order to do so, we do have to take a look at the spending that has taken place over the past 2 years, look at the hiring as well as the positions that have been terminated as a result of not being able to cover the salaries of some necessary employees, such as reading specialists. I do believe that as a result of the much needed work of equity, inclusion, and diversity that's been taking place with the district, some things are extremely necessary, but at the same time, based on the fact that we are in a deficit, certain things need to be moved around, in my opinion, not necessarily gotten rid of, but actually looking at what's working and what it's not working, and move the funding to where it needs to be placed the most.
thank you. Mr. Halpern, you're there right now. Would you use the word crisis?
Yeah, we have a fiscal sustainability problem, and that's been a part of my work the past 2 years as finance chair. And a couple of points. Katie knows about P cards because I dug that up and brought them to a public meeting. Nadona wants to move money between funds, but there's actually laws that restrict the way money can be moved between funds. And Angela's referencing spreadsheets about the difference between revenues and expenditures. In the first 4 years, there was an excess. And if you look below on that spreadsheet, there's a line below that says how much money from the reserves is to be put to future deficits. So we were compiling money early in the referendum years to be spent in the out years, which is what we're in now. So we expected the deficit to be there so that we can use the referendum reserves in the out years. We need to figure this out. We need to straighten up we need to go lean in the administration, but this has been here for decades. When 20 years ago, or whenever JEH was built, the district was asked to fund that. This problem was there then. When we did the referendum 6 years ago, the projection at the time was 112 million deficit 10 years out, which is why the referendum was asked for. And we still have that problem. It needs to be straightened up, and we need a team of 7 to do due diligence and work together to get it right.
Thank you, Mr. Halpern. Ms. Sue, what's your perspective?
I do see it both ways. I do see that this has been a deficit that has continued over the years. The fact that we do have 18 schools compared to 1 in 2002. However, and additionally, there's been the burden that the state has put then on our districts with funding teacher pensions. But I also see a lack in transparency. When I was looking also at numbers and spreadsheets, I saw in February 2020, we were supposed to have a projected 43 million left in our fund reserve. But then in February 2021, our reserve was projection dropped down to 28.5 million. That's $15 million lost in 12 months. So I'm kind of curious what happened there. And I think that from what I'm hearing and what I'm reading, there's been quite a bit of spend in consulting. It would actually serve our community to do better with collaborations with people that know and understand Evanston and all of its diverseness.
Thank you. Ms. Lindsay Ryan, you get the last word. What needs to be done?
Well, I want to say that I think it's a great disservice to have this conversation in 1 minute because it is a very complex problem. And I really encourage folks to check out finance meetings. We had a 5-hour plus meeting on March 8th where we were talking about all these things. So trying to get more information. I think the setup, we often compare 202 to 65. It's an apples to oranges comparison with 18 schools versus 1 school and all of the structural things there. I do, support what Sula talked about in terms of the structural deficit. And I think Joey highlighted that this is a long problem, and the folks on the board now feel like we cannot keep kicking the can and are trying to solve that problem. There's a lot of inaccurate information out there. This conversation keeps happening about 11 new positions. We've put a lot of information out there, and I'd recommend, again, watching finance meetings and looking at campaign pages talking about that. A lot of this was rebranding of positions. A lot of this was changing what this person was paid and moving that money over to pay this person. So the vast majority was budget neutral. And the idea that we can't ever consider, nobody wants to close a school, but the schools have to do their job in serving our community. And if we get to the point where the enrollment is 10 kids in the school, we have to think about enrollment and have things tied to those things. So we can't have any decisions that are off the table, no matter how emotional they are or how tied we are to them. We have to consider all of the different pieces to make the best sustainable decisions for our district as a whole.
Thank you, Ms. Lindsay Ryan. I assure all the candidates and those watching that Central Street Neighbors does not intend to do a disservice. So there's a lot of things to cover here, and we do offer links to all of the candidates' websites on our page. So go to centralstreetneighbors.com after this forum, and you'll have an opportunity to see what the candidates say in detail about the fiscal condition of the district. Next question is about literacy. As Dr. Witherspoon recently observed, literary deficiencies not only impact performance in high school, but have lifelong consequences. What should we be doing differently in District 65 to try to send more students off to ETHS prepared to succeed? And Ms. Kim, why don't you take the first crack at this?
Sure, thank you. I think there are a lot of systematic things that we need to address the persistent opportunity gap, and that includes literacy instruction. I think there are 3 key things that have already been done. I think, early childhood education, we saw some really promising numbers there in the report in kindergarten readiness, and we'll have to follow those children in JEH to see where they are at when they're in 3rd grade. But I think the changes there have to be holistic and systematic, and that's very promising. I think, the reorganization of reading interventionists, I know that's been a very hot topic, but I think that again is a reassessment at a holistic level about what needs to be done about increasing tier 1 supports and having a more collectivist, collaborative approach, as Dr. Beardsley mentioned. And then middle schools, I think we need to pay attention more to middle schools, and we're having that conversation now. We're starting that conversation about career readiness and college readiness and the needed additional supports in the middle school.
Thank you. Ms. Blazing, your thoughts on literacy and what we need to be doing?
Yeah, I think those are actually great ideas, and I don't disagree with them. I think where I get hung up is it's a really hard problem, and if it was an easy problem, it still wouldn't persist after all these years. So I recognize that. My real concern with literacy, and I guess I would say the same with math, is just how do we assess the learning losses after last year? I've been very forthright. I have a child who was tested 2-3 months ago, and it was drastically behind in her reading scores, and hadn't been before. So I'm kind of expecting this to be a much bigger discussion and the achievement gap to be even higher. And I think we have to throw a lot of thought and resources into it, because expanding the achievement gap and the opportunity gap is clearly not, that is going in the absolute wrong direction.
Thank you. Ms. Weatherspoon, is there something we should be doing differently in District 65 to send kids to ETHS with better literacy competency?
Well, I also do agree with Sula Kim. Those are all great ideas. My personal experience is just that with a child with an IEP, it is very concerning that while he was in his younger years, I'll say in 2nd and 3rd grade, that there were not more supports for children with IEPs to help them be at grade level. I do understand now that that the district is working towards providing more literacy support, and also my children that are now in middle school. I think what we could add to their curriculum is also some more people that look like the students that they are teaching, in order to be able to understand where they are in their gap by understanding their ability to learn.
Thank you. Ms. Voorhees, what could we be doing differently in District 65 on literacy?
Well, I agree that early childhood education is so incredibly important. I think there have been some successful things that have been done at Kingsley and Oakton in particular. Those were some pilot programs that actually were working. And I also think we should train teachers on more of the formative assessments that they can do quickly in the classroom and see if they're impacting and affecting the kids. It's a quick little assessment. It's not like a huge map testing, summative testing. And I have concerns about cutting the reading interventionalists. I mean, they're specialists. And if you get rid of them, if you reorganize them, they're becoming more of a generalist. And I'm worried that the teachers are going to be spread too thin, that we're squeezing them dry. And I think that could end up, backfiring on us. Another good thing that I would encourage more is the books and breakfast program, and ultimately don't lower the standards. We have to raise the kids up. My concern is that we would lower the benchmark to make it seem like the kids are doing better. And I just want to always maintain high standards and high benchmarks for our kids. And also, by the way, one more thing, with the 2017.
Sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off on that one more thing, just because of the time limits. No disrespect intended. Mr. Halpern, is there something that District 65 should be doing differently to enable ETHS to better teach kids with the literacy skills they bring to the high school?
Absolutely. I think the first thing, at my first joint board meeting, I sat next to Monique Parsons, a 202 board member, and she responded to one of our literacy goal presentations with, "We knew this all along." And we've known this data. It's been there for a long time. We need to stop talking about it and thinking about it and start doing something about it. So District 65 is the feeder to 202, so the problem rests with us. We need to take a leadership role in cradle to career and all of our early childhood and pre-early childhood, the 0 to 3 opportunities to help educate our community so that people know that a literacy-rich environment matters at home. We need to reorganize our interventionists or reading specialists because they were doing a one-to-one program over a 45-minute session. And now we're going to reorganize them to be targeted and foundational early literacy skills, decoding, encoding, fluency, and comprehension, which are the building blocks for everything that comes later in the upper grades. And we haven't given them the resources, the support, or the time to spend that way with students right now. And that's what the restructuring is meant to do. And we solve the problem in the early years and invest in the early years so that 202 can celebrate the successes of those kids later.
Thank you. Ms. Lindsay Ryan, do you have something to add to what any of the other candidates have said?
Sure. I just want to point out Joey's response is why you always want a principal on the board, someone who understands how this gets applied in the everyday. And to Marquise's point, I do think hiring a more diverse staff is part of this equation. I think a lot of good things were highlighted in terms of our early intervention work with pre-K, but where I would add some pieces. And Sula and I are both on a committee trying to address this middle school piece now, because I do think this is a huge part of the puzzle. We've put a lot into early childhood. We've done a lot in K through 3, but there are kids that are not getting on target and then they're just staying off target. I think we want to try to get our data more specific. This is the only thing that I would say about the problem we don't know yet is what schools are kids coming from, what teachers are teaching those kids, and how do we give them the coaching they need so that we can be more successful in the kids that are not getting on track. Social emotional learning and relationships are a huge part of this. And I think we're gonna have to have a lot of summer interventions this summer to try to help get everybody where they need to be. So I think this shift in the programming from a collectivist approach, from a siloed approach to a collectivist approach, I think is the right strategy to build on the expertise that we have.
Ms. Mubayai, do you agree?
I actually agree with a number of points, but one of the main reasons why I decided to run was to address the academic achievement gap for Black and Brown students. The literacy issue has been ongoing for decades. And my argument has been that even though a child might be African-American and born and raised in the United States, there are different dialects that are spoken in the Black community, whether they're African-American, whether they're Haitian, whether they're Jamaican. And that plays a major role in whether or not a child is able to comprehend the standard English that is taught at the schools. So in that aspect, I do agree with Marquise, where she was saying that having educators that look like the students both looking like and also speaking in the same manner, where that educator can be able to translate from those dialects into standard English. And I know a number of people might feel that it wouldn't be necessary, but the fact that Black children have increasingly over the years continued to fail with literacy, it means that something needs to be done to address that, to give them the proper support. And since the pandemic, our Spanish-speaking students are falling even further and further behind. The English emergent learners are not doing well, and that needs to be addressed by the district.
Thank you. Ms. Kim, you get the final word on whether do we need new blood, new ideas on the board to
I
address
think I
literacy?
already went. I think Donna Wang Su is next.
I'm so sorry. You are correct. I've got a very tiny font here. Ms. Sue, you get the final word on this. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Sula. It's raising my hand. I agree with a lot of the points that were brought up. I do think that our joint literacy goal is really comprised of a variety of different plans and actions, but there's so many and they're spread thinly. So there isn't particularly one focus to make a significant impact. When I was looking at the pre-K to third grade literacy, I noticed that the curriculum doesn't align with the science of reading, where literacy carries over into all of the different parts of education, where literacy is being reinforced through your science, your social studies, and other general education curriculum. I think even as the district is introducing Equity Week curriculum, having that same thread of literacy. Additionally, I know that there's been a lot of effort on early childhood, but kids come into our district at all ages and all throughout. So I do think that it's great that the board is looking into middle school, especially where interventions could be doubled down. And I know that there was some work done around the 8th grade level, which has reduced the number of students below the reading proficiency level. So I would love to see something like that continue. And I really think, the process has been reorganization, but how is it going to be better outcomes for our kids? And are we even giving a program enough time to be effective and supportive?
Thank you so much. As I've said earlier, we have an election in a couple weeks, and well, candidates tend to be personable, and you all have passion and intelligence. Folks are looking for a way to make a choice. Is there a difference between you and some of the other candidates and how you'd like to see the district going about COVID and the reopening or repairing the damage that has been done? And if you want to talk about mental health issues, I suppose this would be a place to enter into that conversation as well. I'm sorry that we only have a minute. It's a big question. Ms. Voorhees, if you could lead off.
Yeah, COVID has really impacted all of our kids and their families. And, I was just reading an article in the Harvard Gazette talking about, the kids whose parents have been more adversely affected are the ones who are going to have the more long-term problems with COVID, with the mental health and psychological issues. So we're talking parents who have lost their jobs or parents who are more stressed out. I see a lot in my own practice, parents who are over-relying on substance abuse, and kids really have had to fend for themselves. And so when they come back to the schools, now it's hybrid. In the fall, I expect that it will be full-time, 5 days a week. We're going to need to have lots of supports for these kids. And we need to have an opportunity to bring in more mental health providers to work with the kids. My idea is to maybe have, make District 65 a training site for graduate psychology programs, and then they can do their internships working with the kids. That way they get more services for no money. Which is the price is right. But also, we just have to really focus on teaching the kids self-soothing tools. And specifically, we can teach kids to help each other as a community. I saw a video the other night of
I'm going to have to, you'll have to say that for, and I encourage everybody, you can put videos up on the Central Street Neighbors website on a blog if you want, if you have that capability. Ms. Moviayi, voters are looking for distinctions. Is there a different way you'd approach COVID than how the district is doing it now?
Well, basically I've been following the district from the very beginning. Though my children are in the high school at ETHS, I do have many cousins in District 65. And one of the biggest concerns that I had in the beginning was that I did not want what was suggested, which was for a specific demographic to go back before everyone else. I was very concerned about that. But after speaking to a number of parents and also following Dr. Horton's suggestion, which was for the Black and Brown students to return first, and that was because they were being marginalized, and because many of them didn't have access to services, I was on the same page as Dr. Horton. But over time, I have been listening to parents and what their needs were. A lot of them were happy that there were pods available for their children to go to study, places where they can go outside of their homes so that they're not falling behind and becoming depressed. So I do believe that they're moving in the right direction right now, where the children are being able to go back gradually. Like my daughter who's at ETHS, she's now back at ETHS doing in-person distance learning. And I look forward to that, the same thing in District 65 for the other students.
Thank you. Mr. Halpern, is the district getting it all right, or is there something in retrospect you would do differently or prospectively?
No. So I was on the medical advisory board as a board member. I was on the reopening task force last summer. I also work in a district that opened our doors at the start of the school year for 8 weeks before we shut down, and we're opening full time on April 5th. So I know very well what it takes to open a school and to work with school teams to get it right. One of the things that's a nuance of board work, and obviously having 5 labor unions, is we have to negotiate certain things. And not everything is acceptable to every group. There's a lot of questions. It takes a lot of time and relationships. One of the things that I bring to the table is my ability to stay at the table, even in disagreement, and to work through things with people. And I think it was a fair question in the fall when people were asking for schools to reopen as to why we were being asked to make a medical advisory board when we have public policy experts and public health officials giving guidance to schools that said different. Why would we ask other people to do different? And those were fair questions that we had to sort through. We do need to open our schools. We need to open our schools last week, more so than we have now. I'm a big proponent about reopening, but doing it safely, because people that don't feel safe at work or feel safe in the classroom aren't available to teach or to learn. And that's the big thing that we need to make sure is that we're towing that line between the professional responsibility and obligation, but also making sure the workplace is safe and the learning environment is safe for everybody.
Thank you. Ms. Blazing, is the district hitting 300 or 500 or 1,000 on this, or is there something you'd do different?
Yeah, I'd probably do just about everything different, to be quite honest. I think it's been I don't think I'd be sitting here running for the board if this had gone the way that I was seeing it go in other districts. So just to be clear, the medical advisory committee came about because of parents. It didn't come about because of board members. In fact, most of the emails from parents to board members were not returned. And some of those returned with actually incorrect factual scientific information. And I just think there's been a really big disregard for science and an overregard for fear. And I think that we're on the right track. But I continue to see there's hundreds of middle schoolers that want and need to go back to school, and they can't even figure out a way to get these kids in the classroom. And that is completely unacceptable. I know of no other districts anywhere that can't get kids into middle school at this point. So I think it's a huge mess, and it's one of the reasons that I think that we have to be really careful in the future goals we tackle. If we can't get this right, it just seems going the extra step and taking on more could lead to other issues down the road.
Thank you. Ms. Kim, is this one of the reasons you're running? Is there something you'd do differently? How would you tackle the damage?
I'm sorry, to tackle the...
No, how would you repair the damage that I think everybody agrees kids are going to have to deal with from a very disruptive year?
I think social emotional learning and academic learning are deeply integrated. So I think we need to pay attention to both, and to boost up the social emotional aspects of academics. But I just wanted to clarify one thing. Dr. Horton never prioritized by race, by Black and Brown, prioritizing Black and Brown students for return. He explicitly said from the beginning that we were prioritizing free and reduced lunch students, McKinney-Vento, emergent bilinguals, and those who are not making satisfactory academic progress. Those were the priority groups. So I want to be very clear that that was clarified, that was from the beginning the priority groups, and I support that. I think we needed to address a crisis that was not having the same impact on different communities, right? It was disparately impacting Black and Brown communities and those in those priority groups. So I think that was a priority, and I support that priority. But as we open and return to everyone, those concerns are still there. Thank you.
Ms. Sue, COVID and the reopening of schools, what do you think?
So similar to Joey, I also sat on the summer task force for reopening schools. I think that I bring a different perspective as a staff administrator. I've worked at Northwestern for the last 15 years, mostly in operations. So I've seen leadership directors make decisions and change policies, but I've been at the ground level, implementing them, trying to, damage control, all of that. And I do think that seen a lot of different things happen at the district level, but I think that from school to school, communication has been so different. And I think the schools where there is that lack of communication has built this lack of trust. I think, when you have this problem, I've heard complaints from several parents that, there wasn't a simple or smooth way for them to submit their concerns and questions without having it be addressed, besides just doing a public statement at a board meeting. So I think we need to fix some of that communication and rebuild that trust.
Thank you. Ms. Lindsay Ryan, you've heard some of the criticisms of what the district has done. Do you agree? Are they in hindsight and looking forward? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, one of the pieces of this discussion is largely about language. And I think that when we talk about safe reopening of schools, I think all of us want safe reopening of schools. We just have a different definition of what is safe. It's not that some of us want schools to stay closed or some of us want, whatever. So, I think for me, we followed the research and I just want to be candid, this is probably one of the hardest decision-making processes I've ever been a part of in my life, because being wrong could lead to death, right? This was people's lives were on the line when we were making these decisions. And so, it was critical that we engage all stakeholders in it. As Joey mentioned, we have 5 unions. And it was probably one of the hardest points for all of us to navigate through this decision-making together. I think it's telling that after all of this hard work together, Joey and Sula and I have all been endorsed by all 5 unions, because we do have a compassionate lens to how we are doing this, and we do want to engage with them and have full conversations and figure out how to get our schools open, but without cost of life.
Thank you. Ms. Weatherspoon, you get the last word. Is the district done it right, wrong, somewhere in between?
Well, personally, I think that the district was very thoughtful in this process. And as Biz just said, that this had to be one of the hardest decisions, considering that if any misstep, that this could have meant the lives of students and the lives of our teachers. So I agree with the way that they, evaluated the situation and getting advice from medical professionals and allowing school to reopen safely. And what it looks like safely for me is now this hybrid approach that is going very well. My children are back in school. They're back learning. They're excited about seeing their friends and about being engaged with their teachers. I personally want to thank the Fleetwood Jourdain Community Center and also the YMCA for Metamedia for allowing pods to be open to continue to engage students and have great staff in both places to be able to help the children that were having harder times with their education. And also thank you to the district for providing extra Wi-Fi for our home. Thank you.
Thank you so much. District 65 has made national discussion this week in Atlantic Magazine for its Black Lives Matter curriculum. And I wouldn't call it a puff piece. Dr. Beardsley's quoted as saying, "We're not in the business of telling kids what to think and to feel," but the author says that the district has crossed a line from education into indoctrination. So the question is, has District 65 become too ideological, and is it detracting from learning? And specifically, I've received a number of questions from residents asking, is District 65 teaching students that, quote, whiteness, unquote, is a bad thing, and should it be? Ms. Lindsay Ryan, why don't you start off?
Well, it's, I guess, fitting that I start this conversation, since this is what I do every day with every client, is to engage in these conversations. And I think it's critically important for our kids to be raised as global citizens, to have an understanding of honest history, to understand all of the context of the struggles that are happening in our current times. And I think our Black Lives Matter curriculum, as well as our LGBT plus curriculum and our, let's say, Latinx, none of those are full enough. Like, we need a comprehensive curriculum, which is why we're doing a revamp of the social studies program. But as a history major, like, I had to be fully out of my history major college experience to learn something that was not a whitewashed history. And I don't want that for my kids. I want them to understand the world that they live in. I want them to understand the experiences of other people. And I think that there's a way for us to do that that is honest and allows each of us to understand where our identities situate us and how that impacts our interactions with each other. That doesn't have to be punitive to, doesn't have to be a declaration that there's something wrong with whiteness, but to understand the systemic pieces that dictate and influence all of our relationships. And if Evanston wants to be the place that folks say we are, this is a critical part of that education.
Mr. Halpern, have we crossed the line and become too ideological? And is there an impact on other learning?
I'll start with a quote in that art piece that's from me, because it also partially is my answer. As a white man, I'd be lying if I said there were not parts of the curriculum that made me feel uneasy. It is hard to have your child come home and point out to you the privilege you've long held, but never noticed. I feel so good knowing that my children are learning the value of community, respect, and fairness in a way I was never discreetly taught in school. Equity is a journey for some, a fight for others, and a distant hope for too many. If this makes the long-term goals in our community more attainable, a bit of unease on my white part is acceptable and necessary to me. I gave that piece to the author that he put in the article because he was asking great questions. And I think a lot of it comes back to trusting our teachers with our kids. We all send our children to school with teachers who have opinions, and what I want is for schools to be less apolitical and more political. That doesn't mean give kids opinions. That doesn't mean impose upon them. That means get them engaged and inspired on topics that really matter to make this world a better place. Because if it's going to be better, it's going to be because of our children and the way that teachers nurture them. And we shouldn't be afraid of that, even if it makes us as adults and me as a white man a little bit uneasy at times.
Ms. Sue, are we in balance or out of balance with regard to indoctrination versus education?
First, I actually take offense to that article. I feel like it was poor journalism. There was a lot of anonymous quotes and a bit of a lack of accountability. And history, real history, is not what I learned in the books. It is not how it's been. What I do appreciate with District 65, what it has been doing with its curriculum, especially Black Lives Matter, that was done in collaboration with teachers. And that's part of what we need to do more of, that collaboration piece. I appreciate that there was the LGBTQIA+ equity curriculum. It helped bring about conversation in our house that I don't know how I would have been able to bring it up. And you know what, as my kids are learning this new curriculum, I'm learning too. I'm unpacking myself. I grew up in an age where I was told to assimilate, keep my head down, and try to be as American as possible. And my kids are proud to be who they are. And I will also say, Governor Pritzker just signed into the bill for including African-American history into the curriculum, which is fantastic. District 65 does the Latinx, and I'm also in support of the Teach one, where we're going to include, hopefully, Asian American history too.
Ms. Kim, are we teaching the right thing, or have we become too political?
Well, I will echo Donna's assessment of that article. I've been reading The Atlantic for a while, and I would just ask all of us to put on our critical thinking hats and take the claims of that article with a huge grain of salt. And I would also echo Joey and Biz's comments about what we need to do to teach our students real history, not the whitewashed Eurocentric version that we've gotten throughout our childhoods. And I want my children to ask critical questions and to reflect on where they sit as biracial children in our community. And I think, you know, I saw this great meme today from a friend and it read, "Diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, and belonging is the outcome." And I want all of our students, however they identify in the district, to feel a sense of belonging. And we can't do that if we can't interrogate our racial identities and our racialized history and the inequities that exist because of those systematic institutions that have benefited one group over others.
Ms. Blazing, I don't know if you had a chance to read the Atlantic article, but one way or the other, how do you feel about where the district is at with its approach?
So I actually largely agreed with the author, and it's not that, you know, I think he pointed out a lot of the great things about the curriculum. And he pointed out some of the things that I think do cross the line. And I think I come at it from a standpoint of, you know, I grew up in a very white, small Midwestern town. I had an adopted brother who was Asian. No family looked like us, 2 sisters who looked like me. And I learned a lot about racism through that experience from sort of the sibling viewpoint. And I'm a big believer that you have to experience things. And I worry that if you're telling kids sort of how to think or what to think, you're going to miss that experience. So I also just think you have to look at the fact that schools are there to educate. And I think a ton of the curriculum is educational, particularly the social studies curriculum and the historical curriculum. But I think there's a lot of things that don't really add to education. And I think especially in the time of COVID, we need to be really careful about the time we have to teach kids and how we're using it.
Ms. Mobiaye, should we be teaching students, especially kindergartners or younger grades, that whiteness is a bad thing?
Goodness. I read the article. Excuse me. And I'm going to be very, very, very honest, extremely candid. I was uncomfortable. And the reason why I was uncomfortable is because the way that certain things are being taught in the district is not necessarily from the standpoint of empathy, even though it's often talked about, but it's not. I don't think if you're going to teach a child about racism and what has taken place in the past that was negative, you do it in a manner where you are going to make the child feel uncomfortable and feel bad about who they are. I think that if you're going to teach it, you should teach it from the standpoint that you want all children to feel good about themselves, but then still be able to point out what's wrong. And the issue with that article is that my own experience with my daughter when she was at Haven was that one of her teachers was going over genocides in the world. But the way that this type of education is being taught in this district is that it's always white people doing it to other people. And I brought up the Rwandan genocide. My father is from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where millions of people were slaughtered in the neighboring country, and millions of people in Congo have been killed over the past 20 years. And they were not white people doing it. But because I introduced those books and articles to the teacher, and because it was not white supremacy who had done it, she refused to include it in the curriculum. That's the danger. We have people who are ill-equipped to teach fact-based history. And yes, I'm fully aware of the wrongs that white people have done in this world. Believe me, I'm fully aware. But when we're going to teach our children, whether it's about history, about identity, about self-worth, we need to teach it in a manner where the children understand that you can't label one group as being all bad and one group as being all good. We have to look at the facts in the history. And even when it comes to children who are 5 years old.
Thank you. Ms. Voorhees, many of us are in Evanston because it's a political and politically aware place. Have we gone too far in District 65?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I chose to live in Evanston because of the diversity. And I know a lot of my friends and neighbors absolutely agree with that. A very informative book for me, at a young age, I read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. And I sort of got this other perspective of what actually happened in history. And so I've always been a huge believer in making sure that real history and values are taught. I read the article as well. And, I think intersectionality and critical race theory, I think those are great. There's a lot of good points. I guess what I do worry about is how do, in intersectionality, how does the relationship between privilege and oppression maybe get flipped? And I do worry that if we use the emotions of guilt and shame and weaponize those feelings, are kids able to process the complicated nature of these feelings? And, will these kids end up feeling, white kids end up having lower self-esteems and feel like they are bad? I just want to make sure that we're lifting up all kids and not demonizing anyone. I don't want that cycle of trauma to continue, but in the reverse form. I think that's a real concern. And, we need to model to our kids how we want to talk to each other. I get concerned if kids are hearing their parents using white supremacy and then kids call other kids in their class white supremacists. I think that's a very, very loaded word.
Thank you. Ms. Weatherspoon, you get the last word. This is Evanston's on the national radar for this. Where do you weigh in on it?
So I agree that Evanston is a very diverse community, and what I don't, the fact that we don't want anyone to feel like they are being ostracized for who they are, or the color of their skin, or who they love, or any differences for that matter. I do believe that it is far too late in the game that we've now started teaching that Black lives do matter, because for so many years that the lives of Black people have been diminished. But I agree with the fact that the district has included so many different curriculums to speak to the times that we are in right now. And our children will be better humans because of the curriculum that they are learning in District 65 at this point.
Thank you all, and I realize it's not the easiest topic. Hopefully this will be a little easier. Accelerated math for decades has been the gateway to the capstone program of the Evanston schools, the Chem Phys track at ETHS. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that District 65 is planning to cut back on that and eliminate 8th grade geometry. So it's a relatively simple question. Is the district doing the right thing or going in the wrong direction on that? And Ms. Sue, why don't you address it first?
Thank you for the question. I struggle with this because there's one answer that I would give you as a parent, and there's a different that I would give you as a candidate. I'm going to start with the parent. I have a child who has been pushing for math acceleration. In fact, he wrote a letter and he says he sent it to the school board. I can't tell because, I don't have access to the district65.org, where he wrote about his frustrations about not having accelerated math available to him as a 6th grader. In this letter, he talked about how are we being prepared for the high school? Is this what it really is like? He also asked, if your child is great at sports, do you tell them, you know what, you can only go so far because you're not being fair to the other kids? Or is there other ways around it? Or another thing, if your kid is great at art or music, you want to encourage that growth. You don't tell them, you know what, slow down because you need to let other kids catch up. Or do you try to support them the best way possible? And I think that's part of where I stand with math acceleration.
Thank you. Ms. Moviai, is the district doing the right thing or going in the wrong direction here?
Well, my opinion is very similar to that of Donna Wang Sue's, which is I do believe that children who do well in accelerated math should have the opportunity to continue to do so. And for those who are not yet capable of doing the work, if their parents would like and the children would like to take on the challenge, I believe that they should have that right to do so as well. I do not think that it's right that because all children are not in accelerated math at this time, that it should be something that should be eliminated, because I believe that all children should be able to be challenged through education, and having challenge is not a bad thing. I think that challenging yourself helps to increase your knowledge year over year. And I am just very concerned about the way that it's heading at this point.
Thank you. Ms. Lindsay Ryan, I don't make any assumptions that just because you're on the board that you're necessarily in favor of what the district's doing. I know that sometimes boards and councils have split votes. So is the district doing the right thing here or going in the wrong direction?
I think we're doing the right thing. And I would say that both Joey as a principal and Sula, who as someone who participated in this committee, will have deeper and more rich answers to this than I probably will. But, I think when we are looking at both a detracking algebra and math acceleration, I think there's a lot of confusion about what we're talking about. And essentially, we are trusting our educators. This came out of our middle school teachers saying, this doesn't really make sense the way we're doing this. Like for algebra, we're teaching the same book in a high level class and we're teaching the same book in a regular class. Like, why don't we work on differentiation so that everybody can get as far as they can get? And so, my understanding, there was a presentation from Stacy Beardsley about this, and it's really a shift of, we were doing like three grades worth of acceleration in a period, and now we've adjusted it to 2 grades worth. So it's not like math acceleration is not possible anymore in the new system. It's really about making sure that we're removing barriers so that there isn't the racial predictability that has been happening with these programs.
Ms. Blazing, do you have a different take on that? Is the district doing the right thing or going in the wrong direction here?
Yeah, I would say that I think there are school districts where this has been super successful in, and I've read about that. My concern is really the concern of sort of what Donna said, is that you do have kids that just, may really need that extra math to kind of keep going. And so with that, it's a struggle. It's how do you balance both? There was a very compelling letter to the board. I think it was in February, from a mom who recited that she was a Black woman at Harvard her first year and hadn't had access to advanced math and was behind, and how hard as a Black woman it was for her to catch up. And that really resonated, because I think you have to understand that by taking away something, you're also taking it away from high achieving Black and brown students, not just white students. And that's really concerning to me, is if we're taking away from those students, how are we making it, how are we going to get them into colleges and make their lives better, not harder?
Thank you. Ms. Voorhees, are we going in the wrong direction or the right direction with the cutback on math acceleration and what I understand to be the elimination of 8th grade geometry?
I agree with Angela, and I don't think we should cut the advanced math. Just as a personal value, I think one should never lower standards. Instead, we should raise more people up to meet the very high standards. And I think we need to prepare more Black and brown kids from a very young age to be prepared for more advanced math. We need more tutoring and more services to just, make sure everyone's on the same page early on. I never want to take a challenge away from anyone.
Thank you. Ms. Weatherspoon, I was going to go to you next. Are you still with us? Okay. I lost your video over there for a second. Are we going in the right direction or the wrong direction with regard to math in District 65?
Well, I believe that District 65 is doing what is necessary for the children that are not benefiting from it, and also giving more opportunity to the children that would benefit from it. I would not agree with totally taking it out, because we do need to challenge our students. We need to be able to offer them to think beyond where they feel comfortable so that they can stretch their capabilities and, be prepared for 202, like we've said before. So the accelerated math, I know that most of my boys, that's one of their favorite subjects is math. So, and I think that their peers would also be able to help them to be more, more likely to engage in an accelerated program even if they did not have the courage to do so. So I would agree that we should certainly not remove it, but keep it and challenge our students.
Ms. Kim, if you're on the board in the coming years, is this a policy that you would seek to change in some way or continue the trend that we're on?
Yeah, I encourage everyone to listen to the discussion of math acceleration at a recent board meeting that Dr. Beardsley and David Wartowski presented. And I think it's very compelling and it's research-based. The issue with Math 6-7 was that it had a segregated outcome. It was a segregated learning space. So I think the issue then is, I don't think tutoring is really addressing that issue. I think tutoring turns the problem back onto the student instead of looking closely at the system that's creating these unequal outcomes. Also, math acceleration isn't going away, as Dr. Beardsley explained. We are doing acceleration by instruction, which means, again, differentiating within the classroom. And if a student is so accelerated that they can skip a grade, that is still an option. One of the other details that was really telling to me from Mr. Wartowski's presentation is that only 25% of students who take Math 6-7 end up taking multivariate calculus at ETHS. So it's a very narrow, small percentage. The other students have multiple access pathways to all the different levels of math. So why not open up that math? Why is Math 6-7 thought of as this, the only pathway to those advanced classes? It's not. So I don't think we should fetishize this one accelerated class as the only way to achieve math acceleration, because it's not. So I would like to see this program, this math acceleration by instruction implemented and track the progress and see if we can then create better access for all of our students.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Mr. Halpern?
So for me, this is a question about engagement. Acceleration is something that some students do need, and we need classrooms that can meet students' needs and articulate to parents how they're doing that. In terms of the research base behind the program, the programmatic shifts that are happening, Joe Bowler out at Stanford, check out ucube.com. She's got a lot of resources that show you what a high ceiling, low floor classroom looks like. These are math tasks that talk about the same standard, the same skill, but do it in highly developed ways, but also foundational ways. So students within the same learning classroom can cascade their way through and climb that staircase and develop something earlier in the learning and become more achieved by the end. Something that if you're in a tracked classroom setting might be capped or might be restricted. And that's what this is about. To what Sula said, we're not eliminating opportunities at the high school for courses. Only 4% of kids take MV Calc. This is about what we call it. And it was predictable by race, which kids were going to be in what class. The teachers came to us and at 11 o'clock at night in a June board meeting on the last day of school presented to us that we are teaching the same classes under different names with the same textbooks. And this group is white and that group is black and brown. And we'd like to change that. And we responded to that. And if parents want to learn more about what this can look like in policy and action, What's Math Got to Do with It is a great book that I recommend to people. It's a quick read, but it also talks about why what we as adults understood as a tracking model isn't what's best for all kids, not just black and brown kids. But in our elementary setting, we have bands of opportunities for kids to learn foundational math skills. And in the middle school, we want to develop the mathematical practices and thinking during those 3 years and give them the full 3 years to develop it.
Thank you. Mr. Halpern, I'm going to go to you first with the next question, just them being randomized. I've received a number of questions from residents as to whether the board and top district staff have been showing sufficient respect to parents and taxpayers. In particular, you probably all saw the roundtable article that quoted the superintendent as sending emails to parents calling them white supremacists or supremacists. And so is there a respect issue here? Why don't you start off, Mr. Are parents and taxpayers being listened to?
So I know Dr. Horton because I work with him as a board member, and I don't think we have a respect issue. I do think that there have been responses, and Dr. Horton has had to re-respond to people because he has felt he needed to clarify his language or restate something. And let's be clear, as a board, as we've been doing some of our policy work and taking some action, we've also received lots of threats, threatening mail, threatening email. Biz has had a direct attack on personal property on our home. We have had Skokie and Evanston police on watches near our homes during periods of time because of the heightened level of racialized tension related to some of these decisions, some of it around reopening the schools, some of it around some of the policies that have been going on. And if Dr. Horton or any member of our staff or board members at times have responded with passion that has offended the recipient, all I have ever asked is, if the goal is for your message to be received, how can you say that so that it can be received if it wasn't the first time? But I can't ask people to apologize for defending their family, defending their home, and responding to people who have really pushed, I can't step into Dr. Horton's shoes as a Black man and pretend to understand what some microaggressions feel like. And it's really something that I can't judge as a matter of respect. I know him. I know that he hears people when they contact him, and that he does respect the voice of the community.
Nobody's asking you to step into shoes that you
Sure.
can't, Mr. Halpern. Being white myself, let me ask you this follow-up question. If the racial roles had been reversed, and you've read the emails, I presume, and a white superintendent had written to Black parents with the same degree of tone and assumption, would that superintendent still be employed?
I say the same thing. If your goal is for your message to be received, then you need to make sure that you address it or restate it in a way that it can be received if it wasn't the first time. And as a matter of employment, I won't get into conversations that board members have with any of their employees around performance or anything. We talk about a great many things. There's a lot behind that curtain in closed session. But to say if the roles were reversed, I would absolutely ask the same question around whether or not the message was received, and if you want it to be received, to make sure that it gets there somehow.
Thank you. Ms. Voorhees, do we have a respect and engagement issue in District 65 with parents and taxpayers? And feel free to weigh in on the controversy we've alluded to if you wish.
I think the respect issue has more to do with transparency and financial mismanagement. Basically spending money that the district doesn't have. And one particular thing that comes to mind, I feel a lot of very large projects have been talked about in their planning, such as redistricting and building a new school and changing curriculums. That's a very expensive thing to do. And I feel the urgency should be around reopening schools and having a very firm plan in place and making sure that happens. I think it's not respectful to make a big decision without getting the input from the community or having a board vote on the decision. For example, with the Sagebird consulting issue, Dr. Horton hired this consulting firm for, I think it was like $113,000 to study and look at redistricting. So that would be reassigning where students go to school. He did not get the board's approval to get this. It also was a no bid contract because this firm was run by someone who he knew in Kentucky. So it was sort of like, a connections issue, but I feel like it would have been more respectful to bring the community in on that decision and also bid the contract out to multiple people to see where we could get the lowest price.
Thank you. Ms. Mubiai, I assume you've been following some of these conversations in the community. What do you feel about the levels of engagement, respect, people feeling shut out or?
Well, I've been following it all of it. And, you know, I even read the emails and I read the response and I read the articles. And what I can say is that emotions are running very, very, very high. They're running very high as a result of the pandemic, also as the result of certain parents feeling that they're not being heard. Also board members that are being attacked with racial slurs and threats, and employees of the district feeling threatened. What I can say is that I did read the response that Dr. Horton sent to the parents in response to the letter, the emails that he received, the multiple emails. And I felt that his response was based on how those emails directed to him made him feel. So I feel that the response was definitely linked to how he felt that he was being addressed. But in turn, he also did apologize in a letter to the same parents, possibly because he might have felt that everyone's emotions were high, and he wanted to make sure that he was still going to be able to work well with the entire community so that every parent's voices would be heard. And he did also reach out to the parents and let them know that he is here to work with the community and to make sure that all parents are heard and that all children's needs are met.
Thank you. Ms. Sue, a couple of the previous answers referred to the feelings of staff. Do parents have a right to have feelings if they feel that their children's education or their investment in their home is threatened? And how should the board listen to those concerns?
You know, as Indona said, you know, emotions are running very high. I was reading an article about how a lot of the emotions we are going through are the stages of grief because we have lost our freedom. We have lost all these rights. We have lost so much. And as someone who in the last year has filed police reports on anti-Asian attacks on me and my family, or received hateful messages as the president of PTA Council, you know, I'm not in Dr. Horton's shoes, but I can understand the fear, the frustration, and, you know, that you get when you're under attack like this. I think that, you know, additionally, you know, I've worked and talked with Dr. Horton several times, and I believe that the school board is there to guide and support him. And that's why you need those diverse backgrounds and strengths to help keep administration and leadership in check, because you represent, you know, you're an elected official here. But at the same time, I think that board members also need to vote more on passing things, create that transparency and create that record. I also believe that change isn't going to be easy, and we need to be uncomfortable as we have these discussions and, you know, just be uncomfortable with it, because if we're not, it's not going to happen.
Thank you. Ms. Weatherspoon, how are we doing on the respect and engagement count in District 65? Are there improvements that need to be made? Do you have some feelings on these recent flare-ups?
Well, I agree that emotions are running high from everyone. We're all in a overwhelming amount of stress, parents and the district employees, especially Dr. Horton, that it's even more heightened to the fact because he has to make these very crucial decisions, and he's the Black man that when you misstep, it is really taken into consideration way more. And he understands that his commitment to our community is more important than how he addressed them initially. And I think him going back and like Indona said, that he went back and then apologized because he did realize where his fault was. And I think everyone needs to take into account that we are all dealing with something. And I appreciate the fact that he was able to, you know, come back and make what he was trying to say more, like Joey said, his message was out there, you know, in a more respectful way.
Thank you. Ms. Lindsay Ryan, back in the Jurassic period, I was an elected official and I've served in government. Do the folks who are in charge have a higher obligation to be the adults in the room in stressful times like this? I'll just leave it at that. If you could continue with this topic.
Yeah, and I want to talk about a couple of things, but the quick point is, like, we're talking about thousands of emails and 2 parents who got this response. And if we had responsible journalism in this town, it would have given context to the situation and it would have given Dr. Horton a chance to respond. One of which got an apology email. So one of which who I think was a fair characterization of the email they received. So I want to challenge the false construction that we're having as we're talking about race and racism, where we're talking about reverse racism, or we're talking about if the person was white. That is not how racism works. This is systemic. There's a way that Dr. Horton is being treated that is different than his predecessors. Nobody sent Dr. Gorin an email with doctor in quotes. So I want to separate, like, lots of people are having a really hard time, and we have thousands of interchanges with those folks that are very positive as we help try to navigate those conversations. And I think it's very respectful. That's different than some of the other things that we are experiencing. We did an entire video explaining all of this about white supremacy and what we were seeing several months ago. You know, I think that it's really important that transparency, when we keep bringing up transparency, I think people are using that when we mean we don't agree. Transparency is people a lack of transparency is trying to hide information. We are on the public record. We are having public conversations. We are pointing people to direct conversations. That's not a lack of transparency. And Dr. Horton working with someone through his professional network is not a conflict of interest. It's not his family making money off a contract. This is all of us have professional networks and people we've worked with that we say that person was really good at what they do. I'm going to try to work with them again. That's my entire consulting business is based on that. So I think this attempt to bring up transparency or bring up suggesting that there's shadiness in the way that things are operating is part of a larger narrative. And I do think it's activated around race in a way that is different than other superintendents have experienced. And it's really important for us to understand that distinction. People can have concerns, people can be unhappy. That is part of the process. The racism and white supremacy that is happening is something different than that.
Thank you. Ms. Blazing, do you agree that the problem here is irresponsible journalism and false constructions, or do we have a problem with respect and engagement and consideration of all viewpoints in District 65?
Yeah, no, I think we have a really big problem, and it's not just at the administrative level, it's at the parent level too. I mean, we have websites that have, you know, parent names on, you know, District 65 parent Facebook page, and there's 30 people commenting because you can't share your view. But to Biz's point, I completely disagree. The Sage Bird contract was, I think, a complete conflict of interest. I also think it was a very clear board violation for not getting it approved. And I think there is a lack of transparency. And I think that's why the press is writing about 500 plus emails in finance meet about finances that aren't being told. But I think what we have to remember here is that I think this has far less to do with Dr. Horton and far more to do with the COVID environment. Every superintendent out there who's kept schools closed for as long as we did is getting angry emails from parents. And as a parent, those are completely justified. We are the only people looking out for our kids in a public education system. And I think part of being a leader is having some tough skin and taking the criticism. So, you know, I think he did make a mistake. I think that, you know, talking about whether, you know, he should have been fired or whatever for it is just kind of not a really good positive way to talk about things right now. But I think we all need to have a thicker skin as parents and as leaders, and realize that people are stressed and parents are really stressed.
Thank you, Ms. Blazing. Ms. Kim, you get the last word on this.
Thank you. I do echo a lot of what Biz said about this situation and the thousands of emails that Dr. Horton did reply to with respect and detail. And I think many parents who got replies from him can attest to that. And I also want to say that when I read that article with the line, "So now parents who question the district's reopen plan are being called white supremacist," I found that line completely irresponsible and without any opportunity for Dr. Horton to respond or provide the necessary context. And I found it irresponsible because in this climate, in this national and local climate, where Black people are threatened and sent death threats, and we saw what happened at the Capitol, to do that kind of misrepresentation is to invite potential violence on a Black leader who's in the public eye. And I thought that was horribly irresponsible. And then to get angry emails in response to that article that was misrepresented, quoting Dr. King to try to put a Black man in his place, it was infuriating. I was shocked. So I would like to turn the question to say, where is the respect for our leaders and their competence and their abilities in this community? When Dr. Horton got here in the middle of a pandemic, where is the grace accorded to a Black leader who is doing the best he can to protect our community, our very diverse community? So I found it, the whole episode I found infuriating. Thank you for letting me speak on that.
That's why we're having this forum, and your viewpoints are all important. We've reached what was going to be the end of this, but I believe that we're having what many in Evanston claim we ought to have more of, difficult conversations. And if you don't mind, is there anybody who needs to leave right now, or can we go another 30 minutes and get a couple more questions in? I give a thumbs up if you want to continue another 20 to 30 minutes.
Or another hour.
Well, we could go hours. Okay. Is there anybody who wants to bug out, and we won't judge you if you do? Okay, then we'll and I've been trying.
It was scheduled till 9 anyway, so we
Oh, okay.
still have time.
Okay. Well, then that could be completely my bad. So there we go. I'll take that one. But I've been letting people go a little over on some of these answers because there's a lot of passion. There's a lot of dialogue with the community, and we still have 175 people watching. So what you say matters. Thank you. Let's get back to what's been called a number of things over the years: the achievement gap, the opportunity gap. It's not just the lockdown beard. My kids were out of 65 a long time ago, but we were talking about this literally decades ago. What I'd like to know is, you're going to be on the board, 4 of you, the next few years. Is there a specific school or district in the US or even anywhere in the world with a comparably diverse constituency that you would point to as a model for Evanston to emulate? I mean, who's getting it right? Who's narrowing the gap, if there is a comparable gap elsewhere, by what they're doing? And so I'm trying to tease out a positive note here of answers and what and where we could look to. What's your role model? Ms. Muyai, why don't you lead off on this?
I'm so happy you posed this question because
You're welcome.
I'm so for addressing the academic achievement gap. And as we all very much know, it is the Black and brown kids that are falling behind for decades. Now, I know you said for us to look at a school that's diverse, but I'm going to look at a school that is all Black and brown. When we lived in New York City, my son went to the Baby College, which is a part of this amazing school in Harlem. And they have very rigorous courses. They teach the children foreign language. They teach them about history. They teach them about self-worth and value. And they do it all in a manner that helps the children to feel good about themselves and to let them know that to aspire to greatness, to become what we refer to in the Black community as Black excellence, should be the standard bearer. And the school is in Harlem. And my God, it's in, oh God, I cannot remember the name right now, but the name of the principal is Jeffrey Canada. And you have to look it up, and it's an amazing school. And if you want to make sure that our Black kids excel, look at the schools that are focused on Black and brown kids doing well. And that's the model that we need in District 65 to make sure the Black and brown kids excel.
Thank
And
you. Didn't mean to cut you off there. I thought you were.
Okay.
Ms. Lindsay Ryan, what's your school hero or your hero school? That's probably the better phraseology there.
I don't know that I have one location, but I do think it's really important to benchmark and research what is working in other places. And I think that that's the benefit of like professional learning and having expertise in our cabinet of folks that have had relationships with other institutions or are up to speed on kind of what's the cutting edge in all of their fields. I think that, you know, we may not find the one school that is exactly like us to emulate. We need to borrow pieces from lots of different institutions. And then I think the larger piece for me is that when we can't find that model, we need to be that model. You know, there's a lot of issues that we are uniquely situated to solve in new and exciting ways. And I think we shouldn't be afraid of charting that course. The PT Equity Project, which I mentioned earlier, and one of the things I started is we looked around the country to see what other people were doing, and we couldn't find it. So we made it. And it's hard work to do that sometimes, but I don't think we should be afraid and limit ourselves to what other people have already accomplished. I think we should research and get the best data out there, and then figure out how to adapt that for our school community and how to make our best effort forward, whether that's being done in other places or not. So I think it's a combination of doing that research and then not being limited or scared by what's not out there.
Thanks. I'll give you the benefit of a follow-up here, because I've never been opposed to those who say, you know, let's dream things that never were and say why not. But is it possible, as you said, that we are being the model? Is somebody doing it better in the United States than Evanston is, or are we doing as well can be done?
I mean, with our achievement data, I don't think any of us would say we're doing it the best in the country. I think there's, you know, I think but I don't know that there's one institution that is doing all the things right. Like, I think there are people who are doing social emotional learning really well that we can learn from. There are folks that are doing service learning in a way that could be really impactful. There are folks that are you know, doing culturally responsive pedagogy and other different touch points that can make a significant difference in the holistic picture. And I don't think we should be afraid of taking pieces from anywhere that we think, you know, is reputable and is working. But I also feel like, you know, we have incredible talent in our community. We have incredible knowledge and passion. And so I don't think we should be limited to just what's already out there, because I do think, and I don't mean that in a like kittens and rainbows kind of way, right? Like it's system, you know, the PGA Equity Project, I didn't like wish it into existence. It was a lot of hard work with reps from every school over 5 years to develop it. So it's about having some visionary, and that's where I really think Dr. Horton is a gift to our district. And I think he's visionary. I think he has a clear vision, and that we need to create the systems underneath that to make those visions become a reality.
Thank you. And I apologize if I appeared to open that too open-ended. Ms. Sue, is there a place that you would point to that's really getting it right, that's doing it better than Evanston, that we should be modeling ourselves after?
So I have a tendency to go down a research rabbit hole, and I looked, and I've been looking at different cities and looking at their different demographics, and maybe their diversity is the same as ours in terms of racial, but then you look at how many free and reduced student population we have, or how many homeless McKinney-Vento students we have, and it doesn't add up. Or if we're looking just at those numbers alone, you know, do they also have those lakefront homes with the other side? And so I don't know if I really see a school that's got it all right, that has all of the different assets and characteristics of Evanston. I will admit that hearing from people I know about the original King Lab and how that curriculum was and almost that Montessori process, that might be something that I think really would help with the achievement and the opportunities for all of our students. And you know what, our opportunities for our students need to be done during the school year, not our school day, not just, before school, after school, because not every kid is going to have that opportunity or that luxury to have their parents drop them off, pick them up late. They might have to take a bus somewhere. Sometimes, if you're going across town for your school, you have to take an hour-long bus ride. So you don't have that opportunity. And so it's difficult to say there's like one school that's getting it right that is comparable to what Evanston has.
Thank you. Mr. Halpern, people move to Evanston, and many will say, quote, for the schools. And if we're going through a period of transition or change or self-examination, I think prospective buyers and parents who are considering, who are already here, but maybe their kids aren't in school yet and are deciding whether or not they want to stay, want to know where are we going? So is there a place you can point to? Can you say, we're going to look a little more like Peoria in 3 years, or more like Berkeley, or more like Shaker Heights, or I'm just pulling cities out here. Really trying to tease out, what from the abstract, where we're going, or where you think we should go.
I'll second what Nadona said. The Harlem Children's Zone was a great model and did a lot of great things for a long time. I'm a big Jeffrey Canada fan. I did my master's work out at UCLA in the Principals Leadership Institute, and our research and our work was in South Los Angeles, doing work that were in schools that were urban, diverse, in charter, in fully public neighborhood schools. There's a lot of examples that are out there that we can lean on. But I think, as Biz was mentioning, we got to look for the thin slices of excellence that are out there. We have one right here. ETHS is a great model for a great culture and climate for a diverse population to learn within. Is it a pre-K through 8 school system? No. But we know that our kids go to a great place eventually, and we need that to start younger and younger in our schools. I love what LeBron James is doing with the academies that he's building, because he's trying to not filter. He's trying to not have a selective enrollment process like a lot of charters have, to select students who will be successful and build a model from there. The Waukesha schools up in Wisconsin are a great model for personalized learning and what we can do to heighten we talked about the math conversation that we had. Personalized learning and high ceiling, low floor examples. They have pre-K, elementary and middle schools that are doing this. And I visited 16 of those schools. They're great models that we can learn from, albeit they're in Waukesha. So they're, heavily, some are rural, some are mostly white, but the educational foundation is transferable, and we have to get out there, see it, learn about it, and try to bring things that we think we can bring here and be successful with. And then lean on our Research One University down the street and the research that they do in the space, so that we can stay up to date all the time.
Thank you, Mr. Halpern. Ms. Kim, is there a school or district that you would point to as a place that we can emulate?
I don't think I can follow up Joey's list of great examples. I think one of the reasons we hired Dr. Horton is because he was successful in his school district, in his large school district, in moving the needle on this student achievement gap. So I agree with Biz that we have a visionary leader and an opportunity to really make some substantive and systemic changes to our school systems to better serve all of our students. I think, a lot of the smaller lab schools have like that. That's where kind of experimental things are tried, and they're small scale. So I think the challenge is, how do you scale it up into a large public school system that's diverse and in different school buildings, serving very high need students with high achieving, well-resourced students. So I think we have to look at different models and see how we scale up and see how we do it with an equity lens. So I'll just say, it sounds like there are great examples out there, and we need to figure out which ones will work for us.
Ms. Voorhees, if you're on the board, in what direction would you be taking us? Waukesha, Harlem?
Well, I'm intrigued to hear more about Harlem. I'm going to be talking with Nadona about that later. But, you know, I think a lot of the kids who are coming to school from the Black and Brown community are dealing with a home life that is not ideal. It's not conducive for learning. And so they come to school, they've got this baggage, they've got these emotions, they're flooded. When that happens, your brain is not able to work. You can't center yourself and focus and learn. And so I think that the environment, the learning environment really needs to be looked at. It needs to be, you know, coming from a trauma-informed perspective, which just means that it's healing, that it's supportive, that teachers understand maybe how to get through to a kid who is flooded with emotion. And then when there are problems, we need to use the restorative justice model, where you come to the table, you acknowledge, you know, both sides of the story, and you come together and work it out. It's less punitive, it's more collaborative, cooperative. And so I really think that we have to really help the learning environment for these kids to succeed.
Thank you. Ms. Weatherspoon, if you're on the board, what's the direction that we're going to be pointing to in terms of a district that might be dealing with challenges like Evanston's, like District 65's? Where are you going to help take us?
So again, as Sula said, after Joey gave all those great examples, you know, him being an educator, I don't really know what to say at this point. But I do agree with some of what Biz said as well. Like Evanston is like none other. What are the makeup of our students, the makeup of our entire community. And I think that we can be the example. I think that we pull from what works at other schools around the country, and we bring that coupled with Dr. Horton's vision and his capability to be able to turn the opportunity to achieve around. I do believe that Evanston can be exactly what we are all looking for, and that is a inclusive, diverse community that is equity based. And I am committed to getting in the fight and putting in the work, because it's going to take a lot of work to turn this one around.
Thank you. Ms. Blazing, is there a school or district anywhere in the US or outside the US that you would point to as a model for Evanston to emulate?
So my answer is a little bit different, because I would take it from the standpoint of like the here and now. And I think the most critical thing is getting students back to the classrooms, not just the ones who want to be in school, but particularly the ones who don't want to be in school, because we know that kids learn best in classrooms. So I just really do think that's going to start happening. I saw an article today that said that opening your doors is and having kids come safely to school is the biggest predictor of getting more kids, particularly in the Black and Brown communities, comfortable coming back to school. So that's great. But I think there's a ton of leadership all over the country in large school systems. Miami, Broward County, both leaders of color. You have New York City with de Blasio. You have CPS, where these leaders have really stood up and said, enough is enough. We need kids back in school. And they've reached out to families, which I think is just really, really critical, having themselves and their social workers really reach out to families and get them comfortable, even if it involves sitting in someone's home and having a cup of coffee. So I'd like to see more of that over the next year.
Thank you. I'm going to go through 3 lightning round questions here, and I know that you could all speak eloquently for a half an hour on each of them, but what I'm just looking for is I'm in favor, I'm opposed, or I'm undecided, but I'm open to it. And really that should cover the universe. So the first question is, there's been talk on and off for years of consolidating District 65 with District 202. Is this something that you favor, something that you already know you're opposed to, or something that you're open to? And I'm just going to go through the gallery view here and give me a 1-2 word answer. Mr. Halpern, consolidation.
I'm in favor.
Ms. Sue,
I'm open to it.
Ms. Voorhees,
Open, but think there's much complication.
Ms. Blazing,
Open and leaning towards in favor.
Ms. Kim,
I'm also open, and I'm sure Joey can convince me to a yes.
Ms. Lindsay Ryan,
Open, but depends on what the money actually looks like and whether it would have savings or not.
Ms. Weatherspoon,
I am in favor.
Ms. Mubiayi.
I'm in favor.
Next question. I haven't seen anything firm, but there's certainly rumor and concern due to some comments at board meetings or reports that schools, possibly Orrington, possibly Kingsley, possibly Willard, could be closed. Is this something that you favor, oppose, or are open to? Ms. Kim, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think it's too soon to tell. So I'm open to it based on the data.
Ms. Lindsay Ryan?
Yeah, I don't think we've been putting out names of any schools. It will be totally based on a rubric of enrollment and costs for building maintenance and resaleability and all of that. None of those schools are necessarily any more likely to be closed than another. It'll depend on the data.
Ms. Sue?
I think same as Sula and Biz. I don't think there's enough data to determine one school or another. I do think low enrollment is a consideration though.
Ms. Blazing?
I think enrollment does need to stabilize for any decisions to be made, but I would be against, I'm not against closure in general, but I would be against neighborhood closure, neighborhood school closures.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Mr. Halpern?
Guilty for mentioning Orrington at a public meeting because it is always shared as the one that Northwestern would buy its property and has saleability to Northwestern, but there has been no decision made, and I am open to understanding both the practicality for enrollment as well as what makes sense in terms of our properties. As a board, we need to be good stewards, and if it makes sense for the sustainability, I'm in favor.
It's a little more than one word, but it's Ms. Weatherspoon?
I think I would be open to it as well.
Ms. Voorhees?
I'm pretty strongly opposed to closing a place like Orrington. I think a magnet school should close before a neighborhood school closes.
Ms. Mubiayi?
I'm open and my decision would be based on data and cost.
Last lightning round question. Up, down, or unclear. If you're on the board, will you support another tax increase above and beyond the current levy limits that the district is subject to? Ms. Weatherspoon?
In the middle.
Ms. Sue?
Strongly opposed.
Mr. Halpern?
Strongly opposed.
Ms. Blazing?
Strongly opposed.
Ms. Mubiayi?
Strongly opposed.
Ms. Voorhees?
Strongly opposed.
Ms. Lindsay Ryan?
I'm concerned about our city being livable for many people on the lower financial end. And so the only way for us to raise taxes would be through referendum. So I don't foresee that even being on the table in the near future, but I would likely be opposed based on the impact.
Ms. Kim?
Yeah, likely opposed, especially since I don't want to kick the can even further down the road. I think we need to make the cuts that we need to make before any kind of additional revenue generation is considered.
Thank you all for your honest answers. We now move to our closing statements. You'll each have 1 minute, and I believe I'm going to go in order I haven't, in more or less the opposite of something we did before. So we'll start it off. You each get a pitch. This may be the it'll be certainly the last televised forum that Central Street Neighbors has, but it will be up for a while. So you now have your final chance 2.5 weeks before the polls close to tell the voters why you should be on the board for the next term. Ms. Voorhees, you may start off.
So in my closing statements, I just want to look at the self-indulgence, I think, with the current district. Just looking at, hiring self-indulgence with money. So spending more than we have, not setting aside the $1 million in capital improvements and capital technology that was promised with the 2017 referendum. Not setting aside the $1 million per year to balance the fund. Handing out P cards to fuel the district's addiction to Amazon, because that's mainly where they're spending the money, is at Amazon. We're familiar with that. And then indulgence with the meetings. I mean, the board meetings are 5.5 hours long. I think we have to use our time and our money responsibly. All other districts, I've never heard of a 5.5 hour board meeting, and I think that needs to be managed more correctly. So I just say discipline and, using wisdom as we lead.
Thank you. Mr. Halpern, your final minute.
We have 5.5 hour board meetings in part because we've had a lot of issues that have been here for a long time. Everything Kate mentioned is true and has been there for 15, 20 years, long before this board, long before Dr. Horton. And it's something that we're bringing to the open sessions, to open meetings and talking about. At our last finance meeting, where I'd recommend people watch, I've been recommending that we change our policy to restrict spending in ways that has been legal thus far, has been done in many districts across Illinois thus far, and it shouldn't continue. I do all my public business on camera, both in my professional life as a principal, but also as a board member. I ask anybody to look at my public record, ask anybody who knows me. You know where I stand on issues, whether you agree with me or not. And I am a consistent member of the board in terms of having a public presence and an opinion, and I don't waver. I also am non-negotiable about things like having a district where we spend quite a bit of money investing in 2 therapeutic special education schools. And there's a lot of nuances to the finances of the district that mean a lot to me that are non-negotiable. And as we go forward, I want board members that I can work with on these issues ahead.
Thank you. Ms. Weatherspoon, your final pitch to our viewers and the voters.
So I have lived here all my life and also was a product of District 65. And I recognize, having my children now in the district, where we're going and how this is going to, how the work that we do now will impact the future greatly. If we do not have all of the players at the table, these decisions will continue to be made with one lens and not the collective lens of the entire community. So I plan to get on the board and bring that that piece that is missing and continue the equity work that the current board has already begun, and just to continue to educate myself so that I can in turn be that more of an asset to my community and get out the crucial things and be a translator for the information that they may feel like is not transparent by the board. What I plan to do is, if elected, that my main goal would be to not get off the board until a 5th ward school is in the 5th ward.
Thank you. Ms. Kim, your final pitch.
Thank you. We all want schools to open safely in the fall, and I think we all wanted schools to open as soon as possible for our children. So I think we're all agreed on that, and how we do that thoughtfully and with an equity lens is where I think some of the disagreements are. I would also say that there are some false dichotomies, I think, in the narrative of how we talk about equity and academic quality in our schools. I don't think instituting systemic change around equitable education is the same as lowering our academic standards. I don't think that's true. And I think, adding tutoring programs is not systemic change. I want to be on the board because I want to be involved in systemic change. That is looking at how all of the policies and practices work to create certain outcomes. And that's where the board sits, is at the policy level and at the systemic level. And I think board colleagues who understand systemic change are the ones who are going to be able to support this district in making those changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mubiayi, your final appeal.
Thank you so much, Jeff. My platform is making sure that all children thrive. And that means that I'm focusing on the underdogs, the Black and brown kids that continuously fail year over year, the children who are in special education, some that do not belong there, some that are not getting the adequate support and advocacy that they need, as well as English language learners. I looked at those children as children who were very similar to me as a child. And unfortunately, as a Black woman, we were often second guessed when it comes to our intelligence. And because my mother when I was very young, and I was labeled as a child that nowadays would have been considered having ADHD, but because she stuck with me, made sure that I needed to do what I needed to do, I went on from at one time a household where there was dysfunction to work on Wall Street as a licensed stockbroker. When I went to take my exams, people questioned whether or not I was intelligent enough to pass the exams. People questioned whether or not I was capable of doing rigorous work and translating financial documents and investing people's money. Because I was a Black woman, no one believed in me, and they wanted to lower the bar, which is what the district is currently doing for Black and brown kids. And if I am on the board, I will make sure that the same opportunities I was given and the same type of support and belief in me would be given to those same children that are falling behind today. The Black, brown kids, the kids in special education, and the English language learners that are being completely forgotten.
Thank you. Ms. Blazing, we have an election in 2.5 weeks.
So I guess I would leave with, finances are the foundation to everything that we want to achieve. And without a good financial base, nothing is really going to be possible. So you can try to continue to do a lot of great equity work, but if you don't have the teachers because you cut them, it's not going to work. So I would have everyone just look at the backgrounds and bios of people on this board. It is not a diverse board. It's not a diverse board in terms of background, nor is it a diverse board based on thought. And I think that the board should represent what the community looks like and what the community wants. And I would also ask the public as they're voting to take a really hard look at where the problem started. And the problem started 2 years ago. We lost a superintendent. We lost two really solid board members with financial backgrounds, and things started to go awry. So personally, I would question why we would re-elect board members who got us into a financial problem and trust them to get us out of the financial problem. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lindsay Ryan, we have an election in 2.5 weeks. Voters have to decide.
I hope that I have your vote because I offer a compassionate lens to the work that we're doing. I'm deeply saddened by the way everyone has struggled through the pandemic, and am committed to trying to understand and make change for our most vulnerable students in special education and emerging bilinguals, the students that are suffering with the opportunity gap. I mean, I think that we, this is what I do, is working on systemic change for other organizations. So I want to give my time and talents to our district. And I'm not deterred easily. I've experienced threats. I've been targeted for hate crimes, and I still believe in this work. And my private self and my public self are not different. And like Joey, I have a record that you could look at to know exactly where I stand on any issue. I'm not having one conversation with one group and a different conversation with another. I believe in equitable outcomes for our children, and I'm willing to do whatever we need to make the success of all of our children a reality.
Thank you. Ms. Sue, you have the final word on the final question. And that being,
Well,
why should we
thank you
vote
so
for you?
much to Megan, Jeff, even Jim and Connie for planning and hosting this. I also want to share that in addition to Joey, Biz, and Sula, I was also endorsed by all 5 unions of District 65, and their reasons included transparency, communication, collaboration, and accountability, my dedication to really seeing things through. I would say during this campaign, I've been listening to a lot of parents and also realizing how special education and our TWE population in ESL have not been prioritized as they should be, in addition to the 5th Ward school, which has felt very much long overdue. I think we need to be able to disagree. And that's what the board is. You know, it is a team of 8 different strengths and backgrounds and able to agree to disagree and really bring up issues. You know, I often say to my kids and drive them nuts that well done is better than well said. And you know what? I show up, I do the work, and I'm always here. So thank you.
Thank all of you for coming here tonight. This is the point at which we were live. Probably the 150 people who are still watching would give you a round of applause. It's it's hard to be a candidate. It's hard to be a public official. Anybody who's running for office wants to be a public official. These are tough times, and I know that some of these were tough questions. Don't take it personally. Don't even assume that they necessarily represent my personal views, but there's a lot of conversations in the community. We all care about the schools. We all care about the kids. We all care about Evanston. I encourage everybody watching to take a look at the Central Street Neighbors website, where we do have links to all the candidates' own websites. And there's a lot more than we could possibly discuss even in 2 hours tonight, and some very important decisions to be made. You all have 4 votes. I urge everybody watching to vote. Tell your friends to vote. We've had too few people voting in too many Evanston elections, and the system doesn't work unless people pay attention and vote. So thank you for doing this. Whoever of you wins, I hope you don't be strangers to Central Street Neighbors over the next few years, and meet up with us, and we can have some forums on something that's besides an election or a campaign. With that, I'll turn it over to our president, Megan Lutz, and thank you, Megan, and thank you, Jim Hughes, who has been in the background, and all the Connie and all the folks making this happen. Central Street Neighbors is a volunteer organization, and we couldn't do it without them. Thank you so much. Megan, say goodnight.
I just want to thank everyone for coming and also sending in their questions. We did try to consolidate things in similar topics so everything could be covered, but I think if we do find something that maybe wasn't answered, we can provide it to the candidates so that they can, you know, issue a response to it. I just want to say that anybody who isn't familiar with Central Street Neighbors should check out the website at centralstreetneighbors.com. Look at the information there that's posted, local news, and we hope that you sign up and join us. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Night. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.